Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our paired university session on dealing with grief in this pandemic. Tonight, we have two dynamic speakers and professionals. Dr. Jason Newland, he's going to be speaking with us about the pandemic and ways to keep our children safe. And then Miss Nicole Rhodes will be talking to us about dealing with grief and ways to kind of help our babies while they go to school, while they're at home, and then also giving tips to parents as we traverse this pandemic. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we're going to turn it over to Dr. Jason Newland.
Well, thank you, Al. I really appreciate it. This is a great opportunity. It was so fun, getting to meet you there that day at McClure North, that when there was the storm that kept us away from being able to do what we wanted to do that day. But this is perfect. Okay, which screen are you guys seeing?
We see the COVID-19 and Dr.
Okay, you don't see and so you do not see my speaker slides. I like this.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about COVID-19. I want to go quick, but I want to tell you where we are, where we're going. And I think I can't wait to listen to Nicole speak. And so hopefully I got a little something in there that kind of segues a bit to Nicole's topic somewhat. All right. So where are we? So as of September 16th, 2021, you can see this is what the epidemic curve had looked like in August. And so I think I look at this all the time. I am an ID nerd, right? So on this axis, we have the number of cases, and each green bar is a day. So right here, right before school started, we had kind of seen our cases rise. And then on September 10th, what we're seeing is it's kind of plateaued. And we all know we went back to school August 24th, 25th, and we've seen it come down, and it's continued to plateau. Now, everyone's wondering, like, well, what's going on in children? All right, so you got some other little curves all in colors. And I'm showing you from August 1st, 2020 here to August 2021. And each panel represents different age breakdowns. Now, this kind of spike right here is the winter surge. So that's the age 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 13. Now, you'll see that these little slopes have changed, right? So back in the winter surge, this November to January, February, we had less cases in the 0 to 4 than we do now. And I think if you want to look at the story that this slide is telling you is, wow, anybody that can't get a vaccine, any age group that has anybody that can't get vaccine, they're having more cases now than they did during the winter surge. I think that's a lesson to us. I think that's what this tells me, is that now the people that are unvaccinated and those who aren't even eligible, that's who's getting some cases. Now, with that being said, our hospitalizations in our children's hospitals, while increased, have not risen much more than what we saw in the winter, which is good. It's good in the sense, and I'd say Delta virus, the Delta variant, definitely gets transmitted better in a house and in a school, probably, if you don't have those strategies like masking, distancing, staying home when you're sick. And so I think this is part of the lesson. And I say this is because our younger children, those less than 12, are going to have an opportunity to be vaccinated, I believe, by November. Okay, so you guys can all be mad at me if I'm wrong later, but you got to be happy with me if that's what happens. But I do think that's what's going to happen. All right, so I'm going to also show you two different slides, because what else is making everything complicated right now with school is the fact that there's a lot of people with colds, right? Like runny nose, coughs. And the thing is when we started getting together more in June, I call it the glorious month of June of 2021, when there was low cases and we felt like, man, I think we've done it. I think we're through this. Well, when we started getting back together, we started, seeing some of these other respiratory viruses that we only see in the winter. One of them is this RSV. And so what you see, this spaghetti, you see some spaghetti strings, right? Well, this purple line is 2019, 2020, when we would see RSV. And as it goes up, that means there's more positive cases. And you can see that typically most years, actually not most years, every year until this year, RSV comes in the wintertime. In 2021, RSV did not come in the wintertime. 2021, we did not see RSV at all. And now we're seeing it in our hospitals in the summertime. No one in there, none of my colleagues, none of my senior colleagues, I'm not that old, they haven't seen this. This is different. And so you throw in COVID-19, the little surge, or our surge, RSV surging, and RSV likes little ones, especially our infants, toddlers. It's adding a little bit more fuel to the fire, making school a little bit more interesting because people have colds. As a matter of fact, I had not had a cold for 18 months until last week. I got my first cold. I got my COVID test and I stayed home, right? What do we say? You have symptoms, you stay home, you get tested. I did those things and I was negative. Thank you. I was so happy. So I think this is why it's making it a little more difficult. I'm going to show you one other virus. This is what we call our Rhino Enteroviruses. As you can see, they just come all the time. And it also likes to come a little bit more in the summertime. And look at what's happening. Yellow, this fluorescent yellow is current. It took off. So this is another virus that makes us have colds. That's what's out there. So you might hear like, oh, I hear someone's at school is sick. And you're like, oh, it must be COVID-19. No. Let's not just jump to the conclusion that someone at school is sick is COVID-19 because it could be one of these other viruses. But that's also why we have to stay home when we have colds. Okay, so what do we see and what do we need to think about in kids? Well, in kids, we know that for the most part, they have done well with this virus. But if there are kids that have medical conditions like sickle cell disease, asthma, diabetes, and obesity, they can get sicker and be in the hospital. Unfortunately, in the pandemic, there's been it's about 600 deaths over the whole pandemic in children. We know we've had 4 or 5 deaths in the St. Louis community in children. Most of these, actually all of them, have had these underlying medical conditions. So this isn't, while at first we thought, oh, the kids are going to be fine. Look, while they are at lower risk, they are not at no risk. So we got to do everything to protect them. Here are the main symptoms: headache, sore throat, congestion. We all learned about this new loss or taste or smell. I'll be honest with you, during Delta variant, we're not hearing a lot about the new loss of taste or smell, not even in the kids. And I that's anecdote. That's me, what I've been seeing as we've been doing testing and calling people. But I think we might see that that's not been as a prevalent symptom. So those people out there like, oh, it's just my allergies, I still have my taste and smell, still go get tested. Just because you're having that doesn't necessarily, if it's new, if this is new and you haven't had that negative test. Okay, I'm going to talk really quick about this. I just want people to be understanding that while we have these acute illnesses, right? So I start having runny nose and cough and, oh, it's COVID-19. There is something that we've seen that occurs later, about 4 to 6 weeks later, called multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children. I know, a mouthful, that's what we like to do to make everyone like, what are they talking about? Here's the deal. The reality is this happens 4 to 6 weeks later, and these kids can look pretty sick, where their hearts are really not happy. They get inflamed. They might need to have intensive care stay. They might need to have medicine to help them with their blood pressure. This can happen in a kid that has minimal to no symptoms of COVID early and then later have this reaction. We don't know why. We can't predict who this is going to happen to, but this is something that can happen. And I want to tell you that because this is one of the reasons that when all of our children that are eligible should get vaccinated. Okay. So here is this. I think this is a cool curve and I'll explain it to you. So on this blue line is the number of children that have had that condition. Okay. Now, what you got to remember is we didn't have a lot of testing and a lot going on here in the very beginning of the pandemic, right? We didn't test hardly anybody. As a matter of fact, I was a gatekeeper, meaning, I had to help people decide who got tested and who didn't. That was not fun. I'll never do that again. But so there was a lot more people positive early on and probably a lot more kids. And then we started seeing this multisystem inflammatory syndrome. This black line represents the COVID-19 cases in children. COVID-19 cases overall. And you can see there's about a 4-week delay. When you start seeing cases, it's shifted. We don't know what's going to happen yet. with these increases in COVID-19 cases with this multisystem inflammatory syndrome. But it happens, and you can see there's been a total of almost 4,500 cases and 41 deaths. And I actually pulled this just today. So this is another condition that we got to remember. That's why we got to do everything we can to protect our children. And there's ways of doing that in the school environment as well as at home and other places. Now, with Nicole going to talk about grief, there is this slide that many people have seen about the mental health related emergency department visits that we have seen during the pandemic and how it's dramatically increased. This dark blue line was 2019. This hatch line is 2020. This is just the number of visits coming to our ED emergency departments. And I can tell you at our own hospital here at St. Louis Children's and even other, Cardinal Glennon and others, we have had children, even younger children than you can imagine, teens, sitting in our emergency departments for days waiting for a place to go because they have such behavioral health needs. Now, there was a behavioral health crisis prior to the pandemic that no one really talks about. Nicole probably knows way more about it than I do, but there is no doubt that it's been one of the things that in U.S. healthcare we have not done well with, and especially in children. And the pandemic has only exacerbated that. So it has made it a lot worse, and we continue to feel that. And we started to feel it even more of late. So that's one. Now, what about in schools? I can just tell you what we have learned is that if you do the things, masking, distancing, use ventilation, wash your hands, and don't show up when you got new symptoms, we know school can be safe. We found out in one study where if actually going to school was safer, you were less likely to get COVID than going to gatherings, which makes complete sense in this because what was happening in schools was the mask using distance. We also learned, and this is one of our main slides. We did this in St. Louis County and Springfield, Missouri, and we evaluated this and we looked specifically for transmission between kids and teachers that had COVID in the classrooms, and we tested the people around them, and we found that about only 2% were positive, which is unbelievably low. Remember, in households, it's probably between 25 and 50% transmission between people. If one of your kids comes home sick with COVID-19, it's a good chance 50% of those people will get it. And it's probably even higher with the Delta variant. All of these things had the same common elements we've talked about. Good, appropriate masking, using ventilation, don't show up sick, wash your hands. All of these things have shown to be helpful. So I think this is to talk about the sickness, monitoring symptoms, knowing that you get the new cough, you stay home and get yourself tested, and those things. There's a lot of other respiratory viruses out there right now. We've also learned that 3 feet is sufficient. You don't have to have 6 feet. That also works. So let's talk about vaccines. Like I said, right now we have Pfizer is approved to be given to 12 and up. If you're out there and you're not here live and you're going to be watching, if you have a 12-year-old, please vaccinate. The vaccine's safe, it's effective, and there's been a number of hundreds of millions of doses now given in Americans and now across the world to continue to demonstrate that it is extremely safe. When it comes to younger children, those children 11 and under, like I mentioned earlier, I believe that Pfizer will have approval probably by November. The most recent rumor and what was actually talked about in the press over the weekend was that Pfizer will be submitting their data to the FDA if it hasn't already been submitted, and then we'll probably hear by the end of October. Moderna, remember, is another one of these vaccines. We at WashU and St. Louis Children's are helping conduct the Moderna vaccine trial, and that age group, that Moderna likely won't be available until 2022. For all of you out there that have children 5 and under, and actually, I should say Pfizer might go down to 5, by the way. We don't know. It's either going to be 6 or 5. So they could go all the way down to 5, which is what most people think. So kids 4 and under likely won't be eligible until 2022. I'm hoping early 2022. And the age group goes down to 6 months. So that's okay, because those 0 to 6 months, if mom's vaccinated, that's going to give protection to the child. Okay, a couple last slides. I think this is important. This recently came out last week. Among those people vaccinated, if you're fully vaccinated, it reduces your risk of infection by 5 times, your hospitalization greater than 10 times, and those suffering death, mortality greater than 10 times. The vaccines are amazing. They have worked way better than we ever dreamed of, even against Delta. And if you've been listening to NPR today, which is fascinating, right? The vaccines, the data we have are so effective. There's a chance for normal, healthy people like Nicole, Al, me, we don't need a booster. I mean, I think that's what the determination is going to be, even if it was 8 months ago. And they can maybe shift these vaccines to areas of the world that need them, that will help in the pandemic sooner. Now, we'll learn. And if they say we need to get a third vaccine, I'll be the first one. I'll say, sure, I'll go get it. But we all should be very excited that, what you've already received works. And that's also what we got to tell everybody, right? I've heard others say, hey, why do we need a booster? Does it not work? No. It works amazingly. So that's kind of what I say. So we keep our kids safe by getting vaccinated, because if we get vaccinated, you don't have a lot of these red COVID people in your community that can get into the school. If we have high vaccination rates, that's it. So that's another important strategy, right? I've already talked about this. Mask work, ventilation works, using some distance, 3 feet, fine, works. Staying home when you're sick helps work. Add on the layer of vaccination, it'll help everything. So that's super important. And I love this slide. I should give all credit to Rachel Orslin. I cannot do these types of slides, but that's what it is. So what I like to say is wear a mask, get vaccinated. It'll stop the virus from changing. So we have to keep doing this. And in that way, I will end. And hopefully I didn't go too long. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Jason. I mean, that was fantastic. Fantastic. Is any parents on here, do you guys have any questions about what Dr. Newland just said or mentioned? Nicole, if you got questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. And then as soon as those questions are over, we're going to go right into Nicole. Good job, Jason. I think you answered all the questions.
Perfect. If more come up as Nicole's talking, I'm happy to answer. I'll stay on because I want to listen to Nicole as well.
All right, great. Sounds good.
Dr. Newland. Oh, I'm sorry, Albert.
No, you fine, Jason. If you want to go ahead and make Nicole the co-host.
Oh, yeah. It's not letting me make her co-host.
Okay. Well, you know what? I can do it.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Nicole, did you have a question for me?
I did, yeah. So I work at Annie's Hope, as you might know, and I live a little further south in Southeast Missouri. And so some of the schools in that area are starting to incorporate in-school quarantines for students who might have had an exposure. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so there's this notion called modified quarantine. And I didn't get into this, but in the project that we did in St. Louis and Springfield, what this means is if I have a student in the school that was positive and they were masked, and you have a student that was also masked, that you could say, hey, look, this is low risk. We know that we do these things, transmission's 1%. So why should we keep a student out for that long? And so that is this notion of, oh, we're going to keep them in, but we're going to make sure things are masked. There's some other things coming out talking about, well, maybe we'll do test to stay approaches, which is another new thing that we might hear about, is that, okay, you're an exposed student. We think mitigation's working well. We're going to test you every couple of days until that period will be in, so that you can stay. If you test positive, obviously you go out. These are all ways that people are trying to kind of think about this and move around. A lot of it really depends on us doing all the mitigation strategies at the time, so that that things are, the safest. And we know there's some parts of the country, right, that you're not allowed. You're not allowed in the school. You're not allowed to wear masks. Or put a mask mandate in place. You can wear it, but so I think it's what's made it challenging, no doubt, during this time.
Is there any other questions from our parents on here? Well, again, this video recording is has been recorded. If you guys want to look back at it, I can send it to you. If you guys just put your email in the chat, I'll copy it and I'll send it to you after it's over. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and go with Miss Nicole Rhodes from Annie's Hope. Thank you so much for being here tonight with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'd like to start off and say, I don't know that if I will have the energy that Dr. Newland has, but I will certainly do my best. And I did not prepare slides tonight, so it is a lot of looking at my face and me talking. If you have any questions at all, please drop them in the chat. You're joining this this Zoom meeting for a reason, and I want to be sure to answer the things that are important to you or address the reasons why you joined us tonight. So my vision for what we will talk about is, first, I'll give a brief introduction to Annie's Hope. Like, why is Nicole here? Why Annie's Hope? I figured we could talk about, what is grief in general, what we know about grieving kids, and then how we can help. So just in general about Annie's Hope, we're an organization that's dedicated to helping kids in St. Louis and their families who grieve. We're the only organization that's dedicated to serving, or that has the sole focus of helping families who grieve, and especially on this scale. So we know that families grieve all different types of things. They can grieve job losses, moves, relationships, incarcerations, etc. Annie's Hope, though, is solely focused on grief by death. As a country, we know that 1 in 14 kids will grieve the death of a parent or a sibling by the time that they're 18 years old. In Missouri, that statistic is 1 in 12. So 1 in 12 kids before the pandemic will grieve the death of a parent or a sibling. If you think about all the people who are important in a child's life, that can include teachers, classmates, coaches, religious figures, extended family, siblings. So when all of those other people are included, the number ends up being about 1 in 6 kids who grieve a death by the time that they're 18 years old. With COVID on top of it, I can only imagine what that statistic is. And then again, because grief isn't just about death, it can be all of those things. Kids now are also grieving the loss of routine, predictability, safety, their physical safety, but also kids in St. Louis, they're exposed to a lot of gun violence, a lot of substance use. So grieving safety because of these reasons as well. Grief is a reaction to change. And what I can't think of anything there's been more of in the past 18 months than change in so many different ways that, I can think of the ways that my life has changed, but the parents of kids in this room, all the things that you've experienced and had to make decisions about because of these changes, I'm sure it's just an incredible amount. Throughout the pandemic, if you're comfortable, drop in the chat the things that you grieve, the losses that have happened in your life. In addition to all of these things that I've mentioned, one of the things that we are seeing too is after someone dies, the loss of being able to hold a grief ritual. So the opportunity for visitations, funerals, repasses, memorials, etc., because it's not safe, or it hasn't been safe for all of us to gather in person at one time anymore. And we know that it's important for kids and adults alike to have those opportunities to say goodbye. That's a loss too that we're experiencing. Any questions or thoughts about that so far? Normalcy, absolutely. I can imagine for, especially for students in schools, the constant adaptations that you're having to make, the questions of, will my student or will my child be attending school in person? Will it be virtual? Will it be a combination? How many quarantines will I have to navigate? Does this impact my job? Me being able to hold a consistent job if my child is constantly being quarantined because of exposures at school? Absolutely. So what do we know about grieving kids? Anxiety of when this will be over. Yes, 100%. What do we know about grieving kids? If you are to leave this presentation with anything from me, my hope is that you leave with the fact that kids do grieve. It just looks different than adults. The number one way to predict how a child in your life will grieve is how the other adults or caregivers in the child's life is doing it. So we often hear from parents and caregivers, my child isn't crying. They're not talking about it at all. They don't seem to be expressing any emotion at all about this death. Are they impacted by it? What am I doing wrong? And so my first question normally is, well, how do you show your grief at home? And then we hear people say, well, it's really hard for me to talk about it, or I want to give this signal that I'm really strong. I have things taken care of. And that right there is the ticket. You know, if you're not talking about it at home, that models to the kids that this isn't something safe for me to talk about, or, you know, it's not a big deal. I just need to move on. That's something important to consider. Kids view the death and respond to it according to their developmental stage. I see some young bodies on the screens here. And so what we know about young kids who grieve is that, you know, they do it in the way that they live their lives. So young kids, they might ask you the same question over and over again. You know, you're probably asked, when can I have a snack? What's for supper? When can we go to the playground? And they ask that question over and over again. And the same is absolutely true about death. When can I see grandma again? Can I go to her house? Can I play with those toys? When can I see her again? What does it mean that her body is in this box? All of those things are so normal. They also grieve the way that they play, their grief span is also their emotional span. So, you know, your kids who, goodness, my words here, their emotional span is their attention span. So your children, probably, you might observe them playing with the same toy or watching the same show for 3 minutes, and then it's on to the next thing and the next thing. I'm thinking of my own daughter who just can, you know, stay on one thing for 30 seconds and then go to the next, to the next, to the next. And the same is true for their emotion spans. So it's not uncommon for kids to learn the news about a death and then seemingly be upset for 3 to 5 minutes and then go on and say, I have my toys over there, or I have this really fun game on my tablet. I want to go do that. And then we get parents on the phone and they're like, so my kid did this. Does that mean they don't care? They don't understand what's going on? And my answer typically is that it's absolutely normal for kids to go from thing to thing to thing, including their emotions of their grief. Kids who are a little bit older, you might see that their attention spans are longer. They do have questions still, but they shift to being very practical things. I see that we have a question there. I'll read it in just a second. I can recall being in some kindergarten classrooms before the pandemic to share the news about a death with a group of kids. And I'm getting questions like, well, how can my friend, you know, her birthday is in a week. How's she going to be able to blow out her birthday candles if she's not alive anymore, if she's in heaven? Who will teach us? Does my teacher know what we're doing since she has died? So just very, very practical things that can be really super hard to answer. When you get these types of questions, we encourage you to be honest with your kids, even if it means that you don't know, to use words that don't have double meanings, or to use single meaning words, avoiding things like loss, pass away, went to heaven, because it can be really super confusing to kids who are trying to make sense of a really difficult concept as it is. If you have any questions about how to explain things to kids, that's so much of what we do. I forget if I mentioned or not that Annie's Hope, we have 10 different programs and services that serve kids and families in a lot of different ways. And one thing that we don't count as a program or a service, but we do every day, is talking with people on the phone about how to explain really difficult things. So don't forget that we're here and we're a resource to help you navigate, you know, how to tell kids about big things like that. let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and read this question. So let's see here. Great. My daughter is 16 and I allow her to talk with me and I listen and allow her to share her emotions. I also discuss it with her pediatrician. We lost a nephew or cousin during this time of the pandemic. Okay, that's wonderful to allow her to talk with you and to listen. That's a really big thing for teenagers, is to invite those opportunities to talk, to share about your own stuff, to talk about what the kids are experiencing. What I've learned from teens is that there's no absolutes. So there's some teens who want every single person at school to know that someone important in their life has died. And then there's other teens who would really prefer that nobody knows anything at all. When people ask how their mom is doing, they will say, "Oh, she's doing just fine." Total opposite ends of the spectrum, right? But both of them are really normal. Teenagers begin to ask more of the meta type questions. Things like, well, the what ifs, the woulda, coulda, shouldas. You might find that they ask more spiritual questions. Spiritual not meaning aligning with a certain faith or whatnot, but questions of, how do I fit into the world? What meaning am I going to make of this? Why did this have to happen? Those types of things are really super normal. Some really common things that we see out of grieving kids this age are new fears, like being afraid of the dark, afraid to go to bed. Sometimes this does have to do with the way that the kids were told about the death. So if we tell a young child that, so-and-so went to sleep, that can be a really scary thing to think, oh my gosh, well, I go to sleep every night. Is that going to happen to me? Am I not going to wake up tomorrow morning? So we encourage adults to not use words like that. Again, those double meaning things, avoiding things like that to prevent some of these new behaviors. It won't prevent it all, but it will definitely prevent some. We find that kids are often afraid of hospitals, physicians, and their offices, which is so true with COVID now too, because there's a lot of people, many people who go to the hospital with COVID and they die at the hospital. They're no longer seen alive. And with visits to hospitals being limited, special permission having to be offered for people under the age of 18, it can be a really scary thing to not know what happens at the hospital. It's important to emphasize that there's a lot of people who go there and do get better. Not everybody who does go to the hospital dies. Again, any thoughts or things, please throw them out there. We can see changes in schoolwork. That's so hard to decipher right now. Like, what's grief and what is the craziness of school right now? The expectations on kids, we're forcing them to be creative, and their attention is so different, and so many expectations for them. But that is something that is true for kids who grieve a death. We can see on total opposite ends of the spectrum, really increased attachment, or kids who are not attached at all. Kids who experience overeating, others experience loss of appetite. Some sleep more, some sleep less. Some kids, especially teens, start to engage in more risk-taking behaviors with substances, safety things like seat belts, walking in the street, experimenting with guns or substances, or sex as well. All of these things are common. I think the degree to which kids experience them is what tells us, is this something that I need to be worried about? Again, always call Annie's Hope, talk to your child's pediatrician or another mental health professional if you're worried about, is this normal? Is this something that I need to be worried about? I'm going to check the chat really quickly. What happens when grief goes unchecked in youth? What age is grief usually noticed? Great question. So in general, when grief goes unchecked, or when grief goes undiscussed, that can result in a lot of things in adulthood. So experimentation with substances, higher prevalence of mental health disorders, increased suicidal behavior, or people who die of suicide, things like that. I mentioned the developmental piece of grief, about how kids at different ages experience their grief. And what we know about kids is that they do something called, it's a term in this world called regrieving or regrieve. And so they experience their grief at different times in their life. So as an example, if a young child grieves a death when they're 3, they're probably going to do those really typical things that we talked about. And then as they experience new milestones in their life, going to school, graduations, milestones like pursuing a license, maybe going to college, a first job, learning how to tie a tie. Those are things that are really big deal and can cause kids to regrieve the events in their life that they happened when they were younger. In general, I'd say that Annie's Hope works with kids, most school age kids. So we work with kids starting at age 3 up to age 18 and their families. We see most kids around the time of 8 to 10. What can parents do to help deal with their own grief? Thank you. Yes. So we talked about how adults grieve are the greatest indicators of how the kids in their life will. The biggest things are to talk about it. It's uncomfortable, it's hard, it's not easy. In some cultures, it's not welcome or accepted. I encourage you to find the people in your life who you can talk about it with, who aren't going to judge you or to feel like you have to preface, as an example, if someone in your life dies of cancer and there's, illness beforehand, you have a lot of responsibilities that part of you is relieved. Find those people who will honor that you're grieving, even though you are relieved to not have those demands on your schedule anymore. So again, talk about it. Find opportunities to remember people. During this time of the year, a lot of people find Dia de los Muertos. I apologize if I'm not saying it correctly. The Day of the Dead is a really significant holiday. Doing memory activities on that day, incorporating the deceased person at Thanksgiving, through other December holidays, other times throughout the year, not just the holidays are big. I know that there's some families we've worked with where opening day or the start of the football season or a certain match during the year are bigger than holidays because of the things that they used to do together as a family. Pursuing your own therapy or your own support group is really helpful. Modeling that it's okay to still have photos in the home of the person who died. Not everything has to be removed. Clothing, photo items, mementos, etc., has to be removed, in the immediate week or the immediate month following the death. Those are all really great things for adults to do. I would encourage you as well to cry in front of your kids. It's very, very uncomfortable. You're the adult, right? Like you have to have everything together. You figure everything out. Why would I cry in front of my child, especially if, they're questioning like who's going to take care of them? By crying in front of your kids, it allows them to see that it's a normal response. It allows them to let things out. It's a really, really healthy thing. Any questions or thoughts about that? Okay.
Those are some really, really good tips. I didn't think about, because I run the mentoring program in the district and we have our boys tying ties, but I didn't think about like maybe the last time they tied a tie was probably going to a service or funeral or so like that, and to where they can regrieve is the new word I learned tonight, regrieve, and it's so true. So I need to be conscious of that whenever I have those different activities and things like that. So I had another question today at work. I'm talking to a coworker. He's a younger guy, and me, I'm in charge of the mentoring program, and I consider myself a mentor to him. And he was sharing with me that, he wasn't. I asked him, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm not doing well." I was like, "Well, what's going on?" And first thing was, his son. His baby mom, the first one, moved their son to Georgia. And it's like he didn't have anything to do with it. He didn't have a say in it. He didn't know his rights. He didn't know. And I told him, hey man, you have the right to go pick him up, and bring him back here if you want. And he wasn't sure. But then by saying that, he really let me know what was really bothering him. And he lost his younger brother. I don't know if it was to gang violence or violence or what, but he said his brother died, and there he kind of opened up a little bit. I was just his ears to listen to him and talk and just to encourage him and things like that. So I didn't want to just drop this question into the chat. I want to kind of give you a background. So my question is what can other adults do and say to other adults, like a coworker, a brother or sister, a parent, to kind of help deal with grief and things like that?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm realizing that I forgot to mention, Albert, is that I'm saying all of these things as if I'm the expert, right? So like, call Annie's Hope. They know X, Y, and Z. And I'm proud that that's our reputation in the community. We've served a lot of grieving families. What I forgot to say, though, is that all of these things come from the words of families themselves that we've served. So Becky, who started Annie's Hope 22 plus years ago out of her home, just, was constantly writing down the things that people told her that were helpful, things that were not helpful, and designed our programs around those things. So these behaviors and things that I'm telling you, the things that help come from families. The things that people have told me that are helpful, that others have done for them, or considerations that other adults have done include, after a death happens, it's not uncommon for people to send a lot of cards or to have a lot of interest a week, a month after the death happens. But seemingly after that first month happens, they kind of get this message like, you should be over it, or why haven't you moved on already? And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? You're past the immediate things, figuring out any rituals that you might do. Perhaps you've sent off paperwork for a death certificate, but that stuff continues. You continue to get mail, all of the seasons that you experience, holidays that you experience, that continues to happen. So if you're an adult supporting another adult who grieves, my recommendation would be to keep showing up. If you're thinking about somebody or thinking about their grief, I'd encourage you to send them a text, give them a call, write a letter. People often tell us that they don't do it because they don't want to cause somebody to think about it or cause somebody to be upset. And the reality is, what I've heard from people is that by asking me about it, you're not causing me to think about it because it's on my mind all the time. So continue to show up for people. I would recommend, or what we've heard from people too, is, people ask them, how can I help? And when things are so fresh, you're trying to figure out which way's up. It can be just as hard to tell people, this is what I need. So maybe start with things that could be helpful for you, whether that's food. If it's in the summer and this person really cares about their lawn, can you mow their lawn for them? Can you water their plants? Can you send flowers? Can you take something off their plate by picking their kid up from school or offering to drive their grandson to football practice? Things like that. Now, some people will tell you that's not what I need. And if that's what they tell you, listen to them. But in general, just start with something, something that says, I care and I'm here and I'm in it for the long haul. I would recommend avoid saying things like, at least they didn't suffer, or at least you had a lot of time with this person, or things that minimize their experience. For some people, the phrase, they're in a better place can be really meaningful if heaven or an afterlife is very important to them. For other people, especially for kids, it can be a really confusing thing to hear that someone is in a better place when the best place in the world could be right next to me. So think about those types of things when you talk with other people, how they might hear that message. Those are some of the things that I think I'd recommend, Albert. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? So I think one of the things too that Albert, you had asked that I touch on are, how to help if we know that somebody's going to die. So like if somebody's in the hospital, maybe on a ventilator because of, gun violence, and, life support might be removed, or somebody's in the hospital on a ventilator and it's unclear if this person will die or not, of COVID. So some of the things that we recommend with kids and families is to, again, be honest about what you know about what's happening. We, as an organization, do advocate for kids and families to visit ICUs if that is something that's allowed. Now, this doesn't mean, okay, you show up at the hospital and you tell the kid right there that we're going to go see somebody and not give them any idea of what the room looks like. We encourage people to allow kids to be part of these visits in person or virtually, but give them an idea of what to expect. If a person is in this room and there's all different types of wires and cords, or their head is wrapped a certain way, or their body looks a little bit different, give a little bit of information about what the child will encounter. These types of things will help kids see, just a little bit more about what happens when somebody is in the hospital, all the different types of medicine and people who are really skilled at what they do for keeping people alive and getting them to be healthy again. And it could also be practically an opportunity to say goodbye too, if we know that the person's body will stop working and they'll die. All of these things are true too for funerals after the person has died. We recommend that kids are a part of funerals and other services afterwards. It can be a scary thing to be at a funeral home or to see a body, but there's no reason why kids can't be there if they're given proper, notice and details beforehand, again, of what it will look like, what the space will be, in the 5 senses, what they'll see, what they'll hear, the people who will be there, all of those types of things are really helpful for kids too. Albert, how are we doing on time?
We are doing wonderful on time. In fact, we are ahead of time. So if anyone have any other questions at all, please. These sessions are for you. Our Parent University sessions are hosted by our Family Community Engagement Office, which I'm the director of. And so a few years back when I took on this position, it was clearly to give our parents what they need in the present time, so to speak. So last year, we were doing Canvas sessions and Zoom sessions and Chromebook sessions, anything that the parents might need to help navigate the curriculum for their kids. Now it's the pandemic. We have Dr. Jason Newland on, we have Ms. Nicole Rhodes on, just kind of talk about vaccines and any fears that our parents may have, because again, we are in this together, we're a partner in this whole education piece. So I'm happy that they're on. I'm happy that our parents are on. And again, if our parents that are on here, and if you know other parents that couldn't join tonight, I'll put my email on here. That way you guys can reach out to me. I already put it on Dr. Newland's and Nicole's emails. If you have any other questions, go ahead. It's okay. And if you can't write it down tonight, I'm gonna give you mine. And if you can call the office. I need to talk to that guy that does Parent University. They'll put you in to my voicemail and I will be happy to call you back. Why? Because I'm a son of Ferguson. I'm a product of this district. I love this district. I worked 13 years at McClure South Berkeley as a science teacher. In fact, you guys probably have kids that I've had in class, if they went to Berkeley. So again, these sessions are for you. We just hope that more parents would get on and just take advantage of these professionals that we have on here. And so our next Parent University session is October the 21st and is about bullying awareness, just things to keep your kids safe from bullying. And you may recognize a bully in your own kids and giving them tips on how not to be a bully. Like I got to remind my kids here, like, hey, that sounds like bullying, son, so and we're learning, again, I'm an educator at heart and my job And my mission is to help educate our parents on whatever you need. If you need school supplies, if you need help, assistance with bills, if you need grief counseling, Annie's help. If you need to talk to a professional, a doctor, you got Jason's Newland's contact. You know, we're going to get you what you need. So again, you're not alone. And again, I'm Albert Harold, Director of Family and Community Engagement. And if you guys have any other questions, we'll wait for a second and let you ask your question, and we're going to get it answered. And if we don't have the answer today, we'll get you the answer soon. So I'm going to stop talking because my students used to call me a preacher. So I'm going to stop talking.
Albert, if I might, I realized that, again, I referenced that, you know, I got into things, I need to slow down more. And it's been a minute since I've talked with groups of people. And so, hello, I see somebody waving there. I love it. One of the things that I realized I didn't say, though, or tell you about is the way that Annie's Hope helps families. And so, again, I said, you know, if you walk away with anything, I want you to know that kids grieve. But then I also want you to know that Annie's Hope in any given year, we help over 3,600 kids and their families, and it's all offered at no cost. So if you have any questions, you know, at all about what we're doing or where to start, know that you can always give us a call and you're not going to be charged a cent. There's no relationship with insurance, no fees, anything like that. We do encourage and accept donations, but nobody's ever turned away because of their ability to do it. And this includes all areas of all parts of St. Louis and beyond. So I'm thinking, Albert, that you said that you were a teacher at South Berkeley for 13 years, and I'm recalling all the schools that we've been so kindly invited into in the Ferg Floor School District to do school-based groups. Some of you might have, you know, been a part of them in our 22 years of existence or know a child who has been. So just know that we're there. Your students, your children are invited to be a part of our summer camps, our in-person programs. All of that is good stuff. We have tons and tons of fun. They're invited to be there. And again, it's all free. So just something that I missed at the beginning. I'm sorry to take up your question time here, but I knew that if we hung up this call and I didn't say that, I'd be regretting it. So just one last note about Annie's Hope there.
Thank you so much. I did meet Becky this summer. And she's a ball of energy. You know, she's doing great work. You know, a lot of times when we talk about social emotional learning in our kids, and then now we're talking about grief, these are some signs and some tools that our parents can use to say, hey, son, he stopped talking or he stopped eating. Well, baby, let's talk about it. What's going on? I know we had one parent on here said that she's opens up. She talked to her 16-year-old, which is amazing. It's great. Last night, so my oldest son is a freshman at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, and he's in the band, right? And so yesterday he was like, Dad, I got challenged for my spot. And I said, okay, so what are you gonna do about it? He was like so up in arms about it. Kind of like if you've seen the movie Drumline, it's kind of like the challenge where, hey man, I'm challenging you, I'm gonna take your spot. And so I just told him, I said, son, win or lose, you win. You know, just you prepared, you ready, you're gonna be okay. So as a parent, I found it very important to just take the stress off of him because he was putting just too much stress on himself. I said, son, at the end of the day, you worked hard, you're going to be okay. So a lot of times these sessions that I have, I need to hear them too, because I'm still a parent, I'm still out here, I'm still learning and things like that. So again, I think I seen a parent, I think it says Anna iPhone. Look like she's in the kitchen cooking something. It's making me hungry just watching her walk back and forth to the.
Okay, I have a lot of food for everybody. How you guys doing?
We're doing good. So happy that you're
okay.
able to make it. Do you have any questions before we end our session?
Actually, my English is not very good, but I hear everything, and I did love everything too.
We understand you. If you have a question.
I don't have a question. That's my first time to be in the meeting like that.
Okay. Well,
And all the question you answer, that was a right answer for me.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Dr. Newland, do you have anything else? We're going to let Ms. Nicole have some remarks as well?
I just, it's tough times. It's going to get better. Just remember those strategies. Let's think about vaccination. Make sure we're all vaccinated. Wear our masks. Stay home when you're sick. I think these are keys right now.
Powerful. Miss Nicole?
Well, thank you for having me. Again, my takeaway, keep talking to the kids in your life about grief, about anything else that's going on with them. The conversations that you have now will only inform better relationships with them when they're older. And keep doing those things that you need to do to make your days a little bit lighter. Get outside if it's safe, get some fresh air, maybe take a walk around your house, your building. Get a chance to smile every day, to laugh. It's okay, even if you're grieving, to laugh and to experience joy. So I wish you all those opportunities for that. And thanks again.
Great. Ashley asked to unmute here. Yes, you can unmute.
I just wanted to say thank you. This is actually my first time ever attending one of these, and I really want to say thank you to Jason. My son was recently hospitalized due to RSV. He is 3 years old and he has a breathing condition. I've feared RSV for a really long time, and he finally caught it. And he actually had a series of complex seizures at Children's Hospital, and they couldn't stop it to the point they had to sedate him. And my children saw it. It was very emotional. And with COVID and this pandemic, we always think about COVID, but we forget about everything else. So I really want to say thank you. I don't have any questions because you guys did a phenomenal job, to the point every question that popped in my head, you answered it. So I really want to say thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'm actually gonna attend more meetings. I actually want to be more involved. It's very easy sometimes to get caught up in your everyday life and what's going on, to the point you forget about everything else. And one of the positive things with COVID and this pandemic is, in my opinion, is showing us how much community involvement, how important it really is, especially in the times that we're living in today. So you guys did an amazing job, all three of you.
Thank you. So is your baby boy better now?
Oh yes, that's the toddler you saw running around.
Yeah. Thank you, Lord.
Yes.
Resilient, man. That's awesome.
That's
yes, you would not. And he was at Children's. They did a phenomenal job. And he actually had to go to the intensive care unit. And the doctors, everyone was just so amazing, and just awesome. You guys are people too. You have families too. And the fact that, you put so much energy into us. I'm one of those parents to say thank you all the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for those kind words. That's very kind. Thank you.
So you may not have a question, but do you have a comment? I didn't ask for comments. This session is for you all. Thank you all so much again. All right, so on behalf of our Board of Education, Dr. Davis, our superintendent, and all our staff, we'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. Hopefully we'll have some incentives. Last year we were giving away chocolate and pizza and stuff like that. We may still do that, but if I do that, then my workouts they're gonna go to the pits. So I can't, because if I have chocolate in my office, I'm sorry. So we gotta wait till next year. So thank you all so much. Have a good night. It's so good to see everyone. And again,